What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo, a very special one, I should say, because I got two guests today, two very known researchers and historians of UFOs. One of them I already had on the channel back in December. It's really funny because I had him just a couple of weeks before everything started in 2025, which has been a lot. And the other one has been working with him for a little while. The first time I saw him was actually during an interview with my other guest. I want to welcome Mr. Richard Dolan and Mr. Allan Lavigne. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you?
Great. Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Pavel. It's really great to be here, and I'm glad to be here with Allan.
Hello, Allan. How are you doing?
Doing great. Beautiful Northern California weather, 70s, sunny. Excellent. How's it in Rochester there, Richard?
Yeah.
We're having some very, very beautiful weather in upstate New York here. Totally enjoying it. I go with walks most days with Tracy. We have a good time, and we work, but we enjoy the weather.
Okay.
He works too much. He's an overachiever.
So I wanted to first get people to know a little bit Allan a little bit, because he used to be part of an organization called the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization that started in 1952, right after the Washington sightings. And he was part of it. And this was founded by Jim and Coral Lawrenson. What's that organization about? Because today we have NUFORC, MUFON, and it's similar to that, right?
Well, it's one of the originals and one of the most prominent ones, and it's often their research is often cited. There are hundreds of newsletters. There's actually a compilation of their newsletters on Amazon you can get, and they were incredibly prolific in their research. There's not a notable case that they weren't involved in. And Jim was very good friends of James McDonald and Springfield and Ray Fowler. I met McDonald and Fowler. I didn't speak to Springfield at all, but James was in and out of the office very often because he was a professor at the University of Arizona, who we did a lot of work with. And all the prominent cases that you can think of, they were often first on the scene.
You interviewed a couple of really famous people within the topic, Travis Walton and Jesse Marcel, didn't you?
Yes. Travis, when I interviewed him, he was still in the hospital. He had only been back for like 48 hours. Coral arranged the interview for me, and it was a telephonic interview while he was in the hospital. And his story has been consistent ever since. Having grown up in Arizona, I can tell you that no one could have survived those woods in northern Arizona, for 5 days without food and water. And it's unbelievable. And then, of course, Jesse Marcel, who reached out. I believe because I just learned this really from Richard, that Springfield had spoken to him too. And I believe Springfield directed him to speak to Jim, and we arranged the interview. And I did a telephonic interview with him, with Jim present. And that was the first on the record, interview we did. And later that year, we did his first filmed interview for our documentary, UFOs Are Real, which was directed by Brandon Chase, who I only learned a year ago was a CIA asset, which I found really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, he was the director of the film. So we're certain that the CIA was involved in our production.
Well, we'll talk about CIA assets today a little bit, but I want to ask Richard something that I think, how did you guys meet, Richard, you and Allan? Because you've been working for a little while together, right? For years.
Yeah. Allan wrote to me. I think, were you a member of my website at that time, Allan, when you wrote?
I was watching your interviews on YouTube on intelligence disclosure, and you had two on Jim and Coral on APRO. And
that's right.
Why didn't they turn this over to anybody when they left?
Yeah.
And I go like, that was me.
Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. So Tracy and I did a podcast, maybe more than one, that talked about APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, which, as Alan pointed out, Pavel, was one of really the top 2 UFO research groups, private ones, for several decades, through the 50s, through the 60s, through the 70s. APRO was really probably the most prominent research UFO organization, maybe in the world. They were that good. And Cora Lorenzen was the writer of the books. She was a very prolific book writer, but Jim ran it as well with her, of course. And they had a worldwide network of investigators on a shoestring budget. They published a very decent quality monthly publication, again, on a shoestring budget, and they did a great job. So anyway, I wanted to, I've always been a big fan of their work, and we did a couple of shows on it on our YouTube channel. And that's what Alan saw and said, yeah, by the way, I knew Jim and Cora Lorenzen. I worked under them very closely, and I almost fell off my chair. I didn't know that any such person was available. So we started talking at that point.
It's a great resource to have somebody who was there with them. So that's awesome.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's so many that are gone now. I mean, that were members like Mars, and also he was with NATO there. I can't think of his name right now. He was on our board. But there were a lot of
about Bob Dean.
Yeah, Bob Dean. Very prominent researchers and UFO investigators and stuff. We had about 800 people reporting to us around the world, and we would receive around 600 incident reports, again, from all over the world each month. 600 to sometimes, more than that, 900, 1,000 even. Now, remember, this is before email, so these are handwritten, letters. One of the more prominent ones was the Ubatuba case, where
I've heard about that one.
Yeah, Gary is analyzing those materials, and those are right from our archives. We recovered that. It was sent to us by the investigator, and so that's fresh out of our.
If I'm not mistaken, the A.P.R.O case file collection is now in the UFO Historical Record Center. Is it? Or
yeah,
no?
Yeah. It was.
Really?
Yeah. It is.
I was going to say, because the way the APRO records were disposed of when the Lorenzens died, I talked to Bob Dean about this in some detail, and there are 2 individuals. I'm not going to mention their names, although I know the names and I wrote about them, but they do not deserve to get any publicity, in my opinion. But they swooped in out of nowhere to pick up those files. All of those, like if APRO is getting over 500 cases a month, you got to think about this. The National UFO Reporting Center, on a good month, will get 500 cases in a month today. So they're doing all of it. If that is true, Alan, I mean, I can't confirm it, but they were getting a lot. So those cases, all of their files were picked up by 2, a man and a woman. They swooped in. Tina Choate and Brian Myers were their names. And they just ended up getting the files basically for a song and locked them all up, and where they were not seen again for decades. If those files have been released now, I was not aware of it. I did hear there was some behind the scenes discussion about getting access to them. So are you?
And they're in the
somewhat damaged, if I'm not mistaken. So you're saying they are available?
Yeah, they're at the where it's in New Mexico there.
Albuquerque, I read, but
Albuquerque.
We got a little debate on right now.
Is this Dave Marler by any chance? Does he have them? He would be a good source.
He's the head of that archive there.
Okay.
They have in Albuquerque. It's kind of a museum library kind of setup. But yeah, they pay basically ransom to get all the 16 cabinets released, and they do have them. Whether or not they've gone through them, I don't know. The only records I have are the ones that I copied to you, Richard, and I didn't even know I had those. But there's quite a bit more information. And we also had, what do you call that type of microfiche.
Yeah,
microfiche. We had a lot of that at the end. I don't know if that was part of the cache or not that was recovered, but we were transitioning all the records to microfiche, which again was a very expensive thing to do. And I never did find out where Jim and Coral were getting all the money to do this.
Shame on me for not knowing about that. And if that's true, I think that would be a really important thing, because that's a great resource, the APRO records.
Yeah,
what I read though was that they were recovered by that record center on November 25, 2023. That's what I read. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'd love to go there sometime and just, go through, see what they've, recovered.
I mean, the good thing about the Lorenzens is that even without those files, they were very prolific in what they published. So the APRO bulletins are available for anyone. There's PDFs you can just download, easy to read. Carl and Jim wrote a lot of books. So they really did publish their work very extensively. And I think it's probably the case that they published what they felt were the best material. But there's probably some gems that are in those files that we have not seen.
Well, there's a lot of data that, wouldn't have come up in the newsletters, like the radar information, signals data, because, it's the Air Force is going, oh, we need more data. Oh, freaking reams of data.
It all needs to be digitized now so that we can do proper searches of it. That's really what we need to do.
And analyze that, take it and plug it into some type of algorithm and see what comes up,
And that data, is there any material in the A.P.R.O? Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. I know Wendell had at least 7 fragments. Yeah. Wendell Stevens. He was a colonel, intelligence colonel, Jim's best friend. And he had at least 7 fragments of metamaterials. I believe those have ended up in what's his name? The Swedish guy there. You know who I'm talking about? One arm.
Klaus Svahn?
No. Very controversial. The Pleiades.
Billy Myers. Yeah.
Billy Myers.
Not Swedish.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, it was a little different.
Wendell really just
he's big on Billy Meyer.
And
really big.
And he gave in his will all his photographs that he had amassed over the years, which are a lot of them have never been published. He even had old tintypes of UFOs. They all went to Meyer's archive in Europe, along with those metamaterials. And they were tiny fragments, like little twisted pieces of metal. And he recovered those. Most of them were they believed they were connected with the Roswell crash, because he went out there with Randall to New Mexico, and they searched and searched and searched, and they did come up with some fragments. I don't know if he ever took them to the University of Arizona for analysis. I know we did the Ubatuba stuff was analyzed, most recently by Gary, and did find unusual isotopes in it. It's not a slam dunk.
Isn't that almost pure magnesium? I mean, I'm remembering the original study of that. It was
it was
a high level of magnesium.
Yeah,
I don't remember much else. It was unusual. Even the original study they did, they were like, who could manufacture this? It wasn't necessarily impossible, but it seemed like a very rare fabrication.
Yeah, it's not something that would fall out of the sky either. Of course, that was witnessed by people on the beach when the craft exploded or whatever, it didn't crash in the ocean. They got those materials. So, I mean, who would be flying something made out of that at that time in the 50s? It's not
Yeah, for people who don't know, I mean, this was in Brazil. Ubatuba was either the river or the town. This people see this flying saucer coming in, and it crashes into the wooded area. It actually hits a tree, and I think it ended up going into the river, which was deep with silt. It was impossible to find it, but there was this fragment that was recovered, and that's the fragment you're talking about. And it was, I think, of an extremely high magnesium purity, something like that.
And according to Gary, the isotope ratio is nothing found.
Gary,
Here.
as in Gary Nolan? Dr.
Yeah,
Gary
Nolan.
Nolan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I wanna ask you guys about the Richard Dolan's USO investigations, because Alan sent me a few illustrations, and if you guys are okay with it, we're gonna go through 3 or 4 images, and you guys are gonna tell me a little bit about them.
Alan did all the illustrations, so it's quite appropriate that he's going to talk about them.
Okay, so let's start with this one, which is a very familiar one for everybody, I would say.
Yep. Well, do you want to take that one, Alan?
No, go ahead, Richard.
Well, that will be in the 3rd volume of this series. So, and by the way, the 2nd volume, I'm almost done with all of that. So I do think that can be published July, hopefully July.
That's soon.
And nice. Then, yeah, I think so. It's maybe early August, but it's coming. But this one here will be in the 3rd volume. This is the 2004 U.S.S. Nimitz encounter, the famous Tic-Tac incident that most people, I think, are aware of. Alan did a really, really nice job with that. And yeah, that's November 2004. Probably, I don't know, probably the most well-known UFO or UAP case in the modern era.
History, yeah. And I'm guessing that first plane is Commander Fravor, and in the back, Dietrich, Alex Dietrich.
Yeah.
What that would be? Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, what about?
I noticed on the bottom, but go back there.
Sorry.
The bottom, Alan depicted some kind of activity on the water there.
The white anomaly that they were saying was going on.
Yeah.
Although in the description that Fravor said, it was like kind of like a cross, wasn't it? He said. Or
that came out after I'd done the illustration. So oops.
Okay.
Still looks great.
That's awesome.
If I can share just briefly about illustrations, and Richard was kind enough to put my little acknowledgement thing in the book describing what I did here with these illustrations. An illustration is different than, well, in police work, there's such a thing as called photo rendering, where you take a photograph, an actual photograph, and you render it. Sometimes you'll even trace the photograph itself. So you have the photograph of the scene, and an exact copy of that photograph. And then there are portrait paintings. That's where you take still life or a person, and you paint them or sketch them, and you're looking at a still object. An illustration is different. An illustration is a storytelling device, and it kind of warps time and space in that it has to tell the story in a visual manner that someone can look at it and understand the entire narrative at a glance. So there was one illustration I did where the ship, this Navy ship, had seen 3 UFOs on their radar. Well, that doesn't make a good illustration. So what I showed in the illustration was the ship on the ocean, and with 3 UFOs flying across in the sky. So you look at that and you go like, okay, this is what happened. There was a U.S. Navy ship, and there were 3 UFOs that were, flying across. It tells the story. There's another one.
This also goes to show, though, that you guys knew about this case before it went public. So that's also something that needs to be said, because how long did you guys know about this case?
No. So this case, well, let me just add, I want to mention one thing without what Alan just said. So what Alan says is true and is legitimate, but I will just point out, and Alan and I behind the scenes had many conversations on this very topic. So I am an absolute stickler for accuracy in these illustrations. And I am happy to say that these illustrations are accurate. Like Alan did an accurate job in them. But there were times when I said, well, that object actually wasn't so close to the ship at this time, or it was, there were differences. And there were times when we agreed to change it. And there were other times when Alan made his case. He said, look, this is, I think, how it really should be artistically. And I said, all right, fine. So we worked it out pretty well, but I think that's a pretty fair summation, unless you want to add to that.
Also too, there were times in our discussion, Richard said, oh, this is a real nice background or whatever. I go like, oh, that is the background. That dock was there. That is, well, like there's one where it shows a half sunken ship. That ship is there. That's why it's called Iron Bay, because that iron ship sunk there. And it's a tourist attraction. So there was nothing extraneous or artistic interpretation. If you see artifacts like buildings or docks or scenery, that's because I went to Google Image. I'd go back to the year that this incident happened and find the exact location and use that as my template to put the action in.
Yeah, totally true. And there were times when I first would look at an image and I thought the scenery could not possibly have looked like that. But in fact, you did do the research and I had been mistaken and you were correct. So Alan did a lot of really good research on making the scene look the way it probably looked. To your other question, Pavel, no, the Tic-Tac incident only became publicly widely known after 2017. Okay. So I didn't know about this prior to that. But by the time we started this project, this book project, which was in 2022, obviously this case was very well known by then.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. All right. So let's go to the next one, which I think is very interesting because it looks like a case that I've spoken to one of the witnesses about, which is the Vandenberg Air Force Base Red Square UFO case. But this is not it, is it? This is different.
This is different. This is from the late 1950s, I think 1958. And this is aboard the U.S.S. Franklin D. Roosevelt aircraft carrier, which at least for all the UFO and USO cases that I've found, might be the #1, have the record for the most anomalous encounters in its history. I found at least 5 or 6. This one was recorded by a guy who was 18 years old at the time. He was on the ship. His name was Charles Grzinski. And he described this object that came in from a distance, was very bright, came toward the ship. This was not a water account. This object was only seen low over the water, but I had to include it. It was too dramatic. And he said when it became close enough, as is depicted here, it was resolved into this kind of elongated kind of a tube. And what isn't depicted here, but is just as well, is that Grzinski claimed, he was quite adamant about this, I must say, that he saw silhouettes or beings inside this craft. So he did see beings. This is, to my knowledge, at least is what he wrote, this was not a case in which systems on the ship went down, like electrical systems, weapon systems. There were other cases with the Roosevelt and other naval ships where this did happen, but Grzinski did not mention it here. And I just want to mention another thing about him. So after he left the service, he remained in touch with a lot of his old colleagues who served on the FDR. And he was on this mission to collect UFO and USO reports. And he did collect a few, and a number of them, any ones that he collected, I put in this book. So the Roosevelt had a very active history with this. And thank you to Charles Grzinski. And by the way, his records, his documents, they are actually online. People can search them out. I don't have the link in front of me, but it's a searchable database.
You can give it to me afterwards and I'll put it in the description.
Yeah.
He did a sketch of the scene, hand-drawn sketch, and that's what I used to format this. A little behind the scenes thing, because people often ask, well, how did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. That ship is actually a model that I created. And there are little aliens in it, but you can't see them well in the lighting. But I did include the little,
it's good.
Yeah, the little aliens. And that was suspended and lit with lighting, photographed. And then I got a picture of the Franklin Roosevelt got the orientation they needed to create the ship. The red background is actually a sunset I photographed, actually in the Safeway parking lot. But it was beautiful. Awesome. Like, hey, that's perfect. And you know, through the magic of Photoshop, I was able to blend all three together. A lot of the photographs are done that way. You know, today they're compilations. I'd create the model, illustrate the ship or the scenery, and then combine everything together. So that's how many of them were done over. Well, counting the black and whites, did well close to 400 illustrations, black and white and color. But we used the color. I'm very glad we used the color because it just called for color.
It wasn't part of my original plan. I was really thinking a lot more low end, honestly. I was thinking some really nice high contrast black and white type sketches. Alan had a different vision, and he very quickly convinced me his vision was the better vision.
They're great, though. They're amazing. And
yeah,
I want to go through like everything he shared to me in our one-on-one, but just a few here because I want to ask you about more things. But let's go through two more, if that's okay. One, if I'm not mistaken, you just said it was from Brazil.
Oh, yes. This is 1966. And I had to review that one because I actually couldn't remember it, even though it's in this first book here. This is March 16th, 1966, and it's right off of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And you had witnesses seeing a white oval-shaped object crash into the ocean near Cagares Island after some kind of violent explosion. And so you had all of the rescue people going out there, search and rescue. They couldn't find anything, but it continued. And then there were reports of this strange object, which is depicted right here by Alan, that was seen over the skies later that night. It was this greenish object that was said to have risen out of the sea. And Alan depicted the cliff there. That's quite accurate in that region, right by Rio.
And it seems like
it's a very famous cliff there. Very.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful image.
Yeah,
and as crazy as it looks, I think he did it quite. This is the crazy thing. Like it seems almost too vivid, too amazing to be true, but this is what people apparently described.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to do in the illustrations for the people reading the book is give them that same awe and wonder that the actual witnesses got, because it's you hear about incidences that are described by witnesses, but actually seeing it is so much different, you know. And I wanted to convey that in these illustrations. This is one of the reasons why I thought it was important to have color, because a lot of times, you know, these are incidents where they're over the dark ocean at night, and if we did in black and white, you'd have a white orb over a black sea, and it doesn't really tell you much.
Wouldn't look like much. By the way, the coast off South America, and particularly by Rio, it's a very active area. I am quite sure there are many, many more cases than what I was able to find. There's always a problem when you're dealing with different languages and getting access to original research from nations where they'll speak a different language. A lot from South America obviously has come up to North America. We are aware. In fact, the Lorenzens with APRO had a great connection to many South American cases, but still there's a lot that's been missed. But there's clearly something important going on off the waters, off Brazil and Argentina. I would not be surprised if there's any number of bases down there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Probably there's bases there.
And one of the most prominent abduction cases came out of there. A farmer who was abducted while he was tilling his soil at night on his tractor. You remember that case, Richard?
From 1957, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very well-known case. In fact, the Lorenzens were the first to get a detailed on that because they had a correspondent down there. I think Olivero Fontes was his name.
Yeah, yep.
He found the farmer, and he was a young guy at the time. That guy later became a lawyer that farmer. He was a very intelligent guy, never recounted his story, and it is what it is.
South America, man.
Yeah, and it involved a hybriding, which you were discussing in your last video. And it was long before the Hill case, Betty and Barney Hill case. So
4 years.
Yeah, a lot of people today, they don't even know about that case. They think Betty and Barney Hill was the origin of abductions, but no, there were many before that.
Let's get to the last one from this little batch, because I think this is one of the most interesting ones, visually speaking, and it's this one.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. So I'll give the background on this one. One person wrote to me. I mentioned his name in the book. Really very nice man. So he was former Navy and just wrote to me out of the blue and said, look, I just got to tell you the story that came to me. He said, a couple of years ago, I was at the International UFO Congress. This is, I think, around 2016, 2017, around that time. In fact, I used to go to that conference all the time, and I missed that year. I did the year before and the year after. I knew it very well. And he said between lectures, we were just hanging out outside, and another Navy guy sat down with him, and they just were chit-chatting. This is what happens at these UFO conferences. Like, there's so much activity behind the scenes. People talking, sharing stories. So this one Navy guy told the Navy guy who wrote to me, he said, yep, I used to work. I was assigned to the U.S.S. Nautilus. So the U.S.S. Nautilus was the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. It was commissioned as such in, I think, 1954. And he said in the mid-'60s, the Nautilus was taken out of commission for an upgrade and refitting. And that is all true. He said, I was one of the few crew members, or I was one of the crew members who was in the post-refitting crew as well as the pre-refitting period. And he said the new Nautilus had some kind of hatch that allowed it to acquire small craft that were found on ocean floors that were shallow enough for it to access it. So think like ocean shelves, not the deep ocean. It's not going to be able to go down there. But about 15% of the world's ocean are on shelved areas. So they're more shallow and could be accessible to a submarine. And what he said is that this was what the Nautilus was responsible for doing in the late 60s, which was acquiring these UFO craft. Hence Allan's excellent illustration. I will mention that on my website, I have a lot of ex-Navy guys on my website. And one of them wrote, he says, look, there is no question that these things are real. But he says, I'm skeptical that the Nautilus would actually have been refitted for this. He said, Nautilus wasn't a huge submarine. And he said, I know why it went in for a refitting. There was actually an accident that occurred during maneuvers in the mid-'60s. He knew all about that. But I don't know. I mean, the story that came to me was very detailed. We don't have any access to the original man who told it, so that's out. And, you know, I'm thinking, could it have been used to acquire small craft? I mean, it might not be appropriate to handle a large disc, but maybe there were smaller sized ones. I can say this. There would be no question. If you're the U.S. Navy or the Soviet Navy, you would be very interested indeed in acquiring any one of these things if they came to grief in the oceans. And you wouldn't be able to necessarily go down to the bottom of the Pacific or the Atlantic, but if it's on a shelf, if it's somewhat accessible, you might get lucky. And why wouldn't you want to at least to make the attempt to acquire these things? So I included that account in this book, in the first volume for the late 1960s, and Allan did a great depiction of that.
Thanks. This is one of my favorite of the illustrations that I did. The refitting story, when the second Navy guy says, well, no, it was just due to damage. But then again, when they have a cover story, they're not going to say, yeah, what we're doing is building a hatch that we can use. That's not going to come, oh, no, it was damaged. So yeah, we brought it for repairs. You know, that's the cover story. use.
Yeah, I took this story more as an opportunity for me in that case to just do a bit of a description or an analysis of how USO recoveries might occur. So when I wrote about this in the book, I'm not really trying to strong arm the reader into saying, yes, it absolutely happened. I don't know if it happened, but I do think it's worth considering the story. And then I wanted to use that to jump off into this other discussion as to the possibilities of it.
And something that you mentioned in your last video, Pavel, about the underwater NRO. Yeah, that's a real thing. And people don't understand that the ocean is covered just as completely as space is in regards to reconnaissance. It's, if you remember, was it last year that deep sea diving accident happened where the submersible going to the Titanic exploded? They had detected that a week after, a week before they gave up the search. The U.S. Navy had already detected that had imploded. There's nothing that goes on under the water that they don't know about. It's just like space. It's
Let me just mention here. Oh, sorry, Alan.
No.
The NURO. First of all, people should know, many of them listening probably do, that there's another great YouTube channel, UAP He did a really deep dive on NURO, and I don't have the link, but people can find it. I have a lot written about NURO for my second volume. That organization started going, I think, 1969. Mm-hmm. So this next volume covers all of the 1970s and 1980s, and that organization was deeply secretive. It's National National Underwater Reconnaissance Office instead of the National Reconnaissance Office, and they were involved in deep espionage activities against the Soviets, particularly planting all kinds of cable devices, listening devices, and the like in the Sea of Okhotsk and other areas where the Soviet Navy was. They were very secretive, very sophisticated, and that is part of the history here. It's, we're dealing with USOs, that is unknown objects that seem to be anomalous, but we're also dealing with a lot of Cold War shenanigans on the American and the Soviet side in particular. So that's part of this story.
Yeah, and it's a nice segue that Alan gave to me right now, because this NURO was mentioned yesterday by former CIA officer John Ramirez, who, if you ask me, I'm from Tijuana. There's no such thing as a former CIA officer, as much as there's no such thing as a former cartel member. It's like you stay there your entire life. That's just the reality of it. And I just wanted to ask you guys, because this is an interesting conversation to have, in my opinion, which has been prevalent for the entire year. There's a lot of intelligence officers that are coming out with, claims and stories, like, for example, Mr. Ramirez, and we have also Jake Barber and a lot of other people. I just wanted to get your opinion on whether you think this may be real, in the sense that they really are working towards truth, or if some of these people may be just they seem real, but they're not really working towards what we are working towards, because we're civilians, most of us. If
I can jump in on that.
Yeah.
The most important thing is what actually they say and what evidence they put forth to support their claims. Now, in the case of John Ramirez, I don't know how specifically he has buttressed his argument. So if he's providing documents or specific knowledge that we can work with, then great. If he's just making a claim that he knows that they're hybrids, that means nothing to me. That's not evidence in any way. What I would say is there's been a lot of research. You could like it or not like it, abduction research and this type of thing, where there are very strong claims of hybrid type beings that may be walking among us. Who knows? That's a totally different thing. But the most important thing is, do you provide evidence that we can dig our teeth into? And if you don't, it's really hard for me to get excited about it. Your larger question of what's their motivation, that is all. I'm going to say this again, because we really lose the thread on these issues so often. That is far, far less important than what is the information and can it be verified. There are all kinds of people out in this world, good people, bad people, honest people, shady people. But what matters is the information and can you work with it? Their motivations, everyone's got their motivations. Some people, you know, they're as pure as the driven snow, usually not, and others much, much less so. We're all human beings here. So what I get, it's frustrating me when everyone's trying to crawl inside someone else's head and pretend that they know what they're thinking. And it's almost like identity politics coming into ufology. In other words, it's like, I don't believe this guy because he did counterintelligence. He must therefore be working an op. It's like, why don't you just listen to what the guy says? Because like not listening to someone else is a great way to wreck your entire, you know, information paradigm here. If you're not listening, then you're really not helping yourself. Everyone's got an angle. Last thing I would say, and I'll hand it to Alan, is, yeah, there are factions and then more factions and yet more factions within the national security world. There have always been. There have always been people who are trying to muddy the waters. There are other individuals from within that world, I am quite convinced, who absolutely want to get at least some truth out there. They may not believe in 100% truth. They probably don't, but they may believe in some. So, okay, take what you can get. So, you know, it's hard always to know. I don't really know everyone's motivations, but the most important thing is just find out, what is the guy saying, and can you analyze it? Can you check it? And if you can't, then you can believe it or not, but I would be inclined to set it aside.
Yeah. Yeah. If I can share from my work experience with DHS, and we worked closely with the Joint Terrorist Task Force and the FBI. And of course, we had assets and informants all the time, and you had to parse the credibility of, you know, a informant or asset, sometimes foreign born. And hey, are they telling the truth? Are they not? This is important. We need to know. We would look to see, is what they're sharing actionable? As Richard said, can we verify this? Is there documentation? Is there other sources? Oftentimes that would be part of the key, is someone would share something with us that we had at least two other sources, independent sources for, that we could corroborate. Other times they had physical evidence, recordings of phone calls or text messages, things of that nature. But it was only critical if it was actionable. Can we do something about it? If someone said, there's a lot of criticism about the 9/11 thing, you know, why, you know, with all this intelligence, and we were receiving intelligence right up to the day of the incident, that they were coming after us with barges. There was one they were going to sail an oil tanker into New York Harbor and blow it up, and we had heard about the, you know, they were going to use planes, just deluge of information coming in. None of it was actionable. It was rumors. There was nothing like so-and-so, a specific person was saying this. It was all chatter, as we call it. If something's actionable, so-and-so is building a bomb and he's going to put it here. This is the time. This is where he lives. And we had two other sources for it. That's something actionable. So we go, and I look at this same stuff. When Ramirez talks about a high-brain program, well, hell, we heard about high-brain programs way back in the 70s, and that the military was involved. And, you know, intelligence officers coming forward with information is nothing new. Jesse Marcel was the head of intelligence for the 509 bomb wing, the only nuclear bomb wing of its type at the time. He was a very credible individual. Colonel Corso, high-ranking intelligence officer, head of the recovery the department there at the Pentagon. He had a lot of people that vouched for him. He was easy to vet, very credible individual. And some of the industries that he worked with. We can go back and check those and see, yeah, did they have contact? Did they work with the Pentagon? Things of that sort. Ramirez has said a lot of fantastic things. I have never seen him produce documents, but I'm sure he would say, well, it's not something anybody puts down on paper.
Even if not documents, maybe information that could be researched and further probed. I mean, we need something, you want something specific that can allow you to go further. And I don't want to shortchange John Ramirez, because I'm not aware of this last claim, but you know, that's what would make it interesting to me, if he's got something that we can actually jump off to, if there's some new fact or new, even alleged fact that we can work off of and dive into. I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, there was he seemed to be alluding to, there was I believe it was either a 4chan or Reddit post about a year or two ago from a biologist who claimed to have worked on alien physiotypes and talked about their DNA profile and stuff, and seemed to be alluding to that, suggesting that, you know, some of the things that say for instance, when Bob Lazar came out, a lot of the things he shared at the time, I go like, that's not well known, but I know of other people who have claimed similar things that people don't know about. Well, one of the things was when Bob described the gravity amplifier as a 55-gallon drum hanging off a PVC pipe. Well, Sergeant Mooney, who was an abductee, described the exact same thing in 1974, 75.
Yeah.
And that piqued my interest, because we never did go to the press with Moody's full. There's one article on the internet that is not accurate about Mooney's description.
It was a really interesting abduction case from 75, Chuck Moody at Allen's.
Yeah, we were going to go full press with that, but
it was a good one.
Air Force, the Air Force disappeared him. It literally disappeared him. I called the base and said I want to speak to him again, because we'd been speaking 3 times before that, and the operator said, no, he's been transferred. I said, well, where? That they go, we're not telling you. That was it. We never heard of him again.
To finish up on what Pavel was asking, though, it's like, and when Alan mentioned Bob Lazar, that's a perfect example. Like Lazar, you know, a lot of people were all over him for years and years, but he was at least giving specific data points that you could look into, like all kinds of very highly specific things that Bob Lazar said right out of the gate in 1990. And so that's something that, at least it's in theory, it's fact checkable to some extent, to a large extent. If someone, and I'm not mentioning this in the context of Ramirez or anybody else, but if there's someone who is constantly putting out information that is vague or that cannot be checked, or like all of these predictions that people love to make predictions. You know, I have to be honest and say, I begin to wonder about their authenticity and their good faith. And I start asking, what is this person doing here? If time and again you are making claims that make me chase my tail, and I cannot investigate, I can't check, I can't do anything other than for you to say, trust me, and then you make predictions and predictions, well, you know, I'm going to tune you out, because I'm going to start not to think that you're credible about anyone.
Just ignoring is going to be more prevalent with that person.
And there's some prominent talking heads. I won't name names, but there's some prominent talking heads that when you listen to them, they're involved in every bizarre, strange thing and they never offer any proof. And some of these people, I've looked at their background. Some of them are service members. Looked at the background. There's no indication that they were ever where they said they were, or did what they said they did. Now, there's cover stories like Jake Barber, where he was a knock, and you're not going to find that. There was a lot of criticism that came up about Jake initially. Well, where's his pilot's license and blah, blah, blah. And I knew at the time that, no, he's a knock. There's no, it's intended that you can't find who he was and what he was. And that finally came out. Yeah. There are people like that, but some of these other people who claim prominence in the intelligence field, I go like, nah, I don't know. You know.
And I think this is another perfect segue. Thank you, Alan, because we're going to talk about 3 specific names in the second part of this interview. The first one is Jake Barber and what he's been doing with Skywatcher, because when Richard and I spoke, he came out like 20 days later or something like that. And I just want to get your perspective on what he spoke to Ross Coulthard about, and what do you guys think about what Skywatcher is trying to do? Let's start with Richard and then Alan.
Well, I want to be careful with what I say here, because I've not spoken to Jake Barber, and it would not be appropriate for me to have really strong opinions about this. I will say I was impressed by his interview with Ross. I will say that, I mean, I know all about the video and the egg, and that supposedly wasn't his crew that took the video, whatever. I think his story seems reasonably believable enough that I'm willing to believe it. I think it requires more follow-up investigation, but he seems to check out on that basis, that he seems to have done the things that he says he's done. The whole Skywatcher operation strikes me as odd. I will just say, strikes me as very bizarre. You know, there's this idea that, okay, so there's two methods by which they're trying to vector in these UFOs. Sounds a lot like Stephen Greer's CE5 initiative on one level, which you can believe that or not. So the whole telepathic reaching out mentally, my impression is that they have some limited success with that. But then there's some kind of technology that they're using, which apparently is patented, I'm thinking, that they say is like almost 100%. Well, I'll believe that when I see it. And then the other thing, I'm not trying to call anyone out here, but I will believe it when I see it. And then the other thing that I'm just curious about, I haven't really gotten anyone to explain this to me. It's like, what is your intention? Like, you're going to bring these things in, and then what? You're going to capture them? You're going to collect them? You're going to, like, are they that stupid that they're just going to let themselves come in there and be captured by you? Is that the plan? I sometimes get the impression that that is the idea. It doesn't strike me as a very practical way of going about it. And I don't know. It's just, there's things about it that it's probably my fault that I don't know well enough the details of their operation. But what has come to me strikes me as a bit odd, and I don't know how to make sense of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the general public believes, or was led to believe, that the point of Skywatcher was to call down a craft that could be captured or communicated with. That's what seemed to me to be the initial promise, and that certainly hasn't happened.
You have to wonder about the ethics of that. I just have to say that. Like, are you trying to do a head fake on the aliens, like as if you actually could do that? And if you did, is this, I don't know, it just seemed odd. I'm sorry, go on.
No, but yeah, I agree, because I'm going like, okay, this should be, if it's 100% and this can happen, this should be an easy lift. And certainly nothing that I can see is any more than the type of data and stuff that we've got before. And you have to remember too that Jake was not an intelligence asset as far as like a field asset. He was a recovery specialist. He was a pilot, recovery specialist. He wasn't gathering intelligence from foreign sources. He was sent, go get this package and bring it back. And in that capacity, yeah, you're going to see things that are confidential and top secret, and you're going to know things, but he wasn't an intelligence asset like Ramirez, where you're actually being, gathering data. But it's as far as the psionics aspect, that's been alleged. Psychic abilities have been connected with the phenomenon since it began. And
that's not controversial. I mean,
even very, very controversial. It was really
I could accept
quite
that.
popular in the 70s. And then you had a bunch of charlatans that went on TV and made predictions that fell apart, and they were, revealed, and it fell out of favor, and universities that were studying it stopped studying it. Stanford, of course, did the remote viewing. Russell Targ, he lives right here in the Bay Area. I'm glad he's still around and can he's still in his 90s now, isn't he, Richard?
Yeah.
And he's still a great source of information on that. And there's nothing, people go like, oh, that's kind of woo when Lou mentioned it in his book, but no, even now you can go on Amazon and you can buy a drone that you can control with your mind right now.
Seriously?
Seriously, absolutely seriously. You have a little band you put on your head and you can fly the drone and you go right or left or whatever. Yeah, it's like $40. Yeah, I do too. I want to get one. This is technology that's been around since the 90s. It was developed by DARPA, which is over here in Berkeley, using your mind to control, mechanical things and stuff like that. With the UFO phenomenon, this goes one step further, and we don't have time to talk about it now, but regarding quantum physics and how that works, there is quite a scientific connection to how this operates and how you can fly a craft from Zeta Reticuli to the Earth without breaking, the light speed, the barrier. But it has to do with quantum physics, and it's very involved, and we don't really have time to go into that now or how it's connected to consciousness, but there's a very logical and scientific reason how this all connects, and it's explainable. But the general public, I don't think, first off, they'd be interested, and secondly, would they even understand? I don't know. But it's definitely a scientific principle that's out there, and it's easy to understand, and maybe sometime we can talk more in depth about it. But that psychic phenomenon, telekinesis, and remote viewing was all very popular in the 70s, and it's legit. Richard's wife is a remote viewer.
A remote viewer.
She's a good one.
Very, very successful one. I don't think I know of anyone that hasn't had some type of psychic experience in their life. Has had something. I've had them. Richard had one with his father, his late father. Everyone has had something. And when you understand the quantum science and how the consciousness is connected to all this, you can say, okay, I can see the connection now. I can see how this might all work. So it's not woo. It's really not.
It does get more complicated than that, though, because the other person out of another two that we're going to talk about is Harald Malmgren. And if you guys saw the interview he did with Jesse, there seems to be some kind of connection there with both consciousness and potentially time. And first of all, I just want to ask you about what you thought about his testimony since he came out on Twitter, and then he spoke to Jesse, and it was very dramatic because he sadly passed away almost right after that interview. So let's start with Rich Dolan. What do you think?
Jesse Michael was really lucky to get that interview just in time. Malmgren died within a day or two of doing that interview with him. Like, it was that quick. I watched all of that interview, and his Twitter feed, I'm sure it's still available. People can read it. Yeah, he started really talking a lot. So Harald Malmgren was a super brilliant, perhaps genius level economist. He was exceptionally intelligent man. He wasn't just a regular smart guy. He was a consultant for 4 U.S. presidents, from Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Gerald Ford. 4. He moved in the highest of the high circles. Everyone knew he was a genius, and his thing was economics. But he worked in all areas. I mean, he was just an all-around brilliant man. And toward the end of his life, started talking about what he knew about the U.S. government and the whole UFO or UAP situation, and was, I think, really quite explicit. Talked about, which I thought was quite amazing, the U.S. recovery of the Italian disc from the 1933 event.
Magenta.
Near Milan. Yeah. And he had a lot of he had a few interesting twists to that story, which no one had heard before, like how the U.S. acquired it during the war through the Vatican and all of these things. So I think he was extremely lucid. He was accompanied by his daughter, Pippa Malmgren, who is also a very accomplished professional in her own right. And there is absolutely no reason to question what Harald Malmgren is saying, in my opinion. None.
Yeah, and yet there were debunks of his story, which I thought were really shameful.
It's to be expected.
Well, yeah, and they were attempted. They don't hold water. If you know, he's probably one of the best documented individuals of you know, through the 60s and 70s. I mean, I remember him. You know, he was a very prominent individual. So him coming out speaking, that's as high in the political realm as you're going to get. It's almost presidential level as far as if he's saying it, yeah, you can take it to the bank.
I have to agree. Have to agree.
He did mention that he handled debris from the Triple Prime crash. That's another incident that that Richard goes over in his book, and he claimed that when he touched it, it spoke to him, and that addresses something that's what you alluded to as far as how this relates to consciousness. These ships, you know, I just shared about the little craft you can get on Amazon, fly with your mind. You can the little quadcopter. These ships don't work like machines. They work like a man riding a horse. You get a rapport when you ride a horse, and you communicate with the horse. You don't talk. You might talk to the horse, go left, right, but that's the kind of connection these beings have with these craft. They're not sentient, like full conscious awareness like the pilots, but they're sentient like a horse or animal that you can communicate with and say, go left, go right, go do this, do that. So there is that conscious connection. Corso claimed that they collected headbands off the dead aliens in that craft that they believed were used to control the craft. Yeah. And beyond this, what Malmgren had said about the craft, speaking to other people have said that when they've touched a craft that has landed, that they feel it's communicating with. Rendlesham was one of those. So that they're in some way, you know, cognizant. They can be communicated with. It's more advanced than our fighter system where, you know, you've got a helmet and you're communicating with the plane, not through a wireless connection using your brain waves. This is a step beyond that, or several steps beyond that. But you have a craft that's almost alive that you can communicate with.
This happened to Chris Bledsoe as well, if I'm not mistaken. Did it? When he went to NASA, they also made him touch something that reacted. That's I think that has been told.
It's I don't know about Chris, but I know many witnesses have described the same phenomenon. That
long-standing.
What's his name? Richard, maybe his name escapes me right now. You met him at one of the conferences. Heavyset guy, Southern. He's a child prodigy.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I actually once spilled an entire glass of red wine on his lap. Yeah. And
those conferences get wild, huh?
I'm drawing a total blank, and I know him very. I've known him. I have people will listen. He was a 17-year-old prodigy. He goes out to groom or Area 51 or Groom Lake for rockets, and I wish I could. My brain is just shutting off here. I
can't name his name either. He's very prominent.
Sorry, guys. Someone write a comment below. They'll clean it up.
They'll know what we're talking about. But he claimed to touch a ship that communicated to him.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say this because I like him personally, and I said to him straight up, it's like, I don't really know if you're telling the truth or you're just the greatest bullshit artist I've ever met. because he's great at telling a story, and he's very, very nice, and it's impossible not to like him personally. But and he is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant, for real. But like hearing his stories, like the guy's been everywhere. He's talked to everyone. I'm like, really? Have you done all of that? Maybe he has. But his claim was that he touched the craft and it felt alive, and it felt like conscious to him as well. And I'm so sorry. He's David. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember.
I've talked to you about him several times, and his name.
And if he's out there, I wish him well. He's a good guy.
The first comment is gonna be somebody saying his name. I can guarantee.
No, they will. It's anyway. Sorry, but
he was a childhood friend of the Armstrongs, and one of the stories
that's right.
About the moon landing, people will ask, "Oh, where were you during the moon landing?" And he's embarrassed to say,
"Well, at their house."
Yeah, I was in their house. I slept in Armstrong's bed that night. Yeah,
I heard him tell that story. I'm like, come on, man.
I did follow that up, Richard, and everything he said was true.
What?
Now, because he talked about how they were bringing gifts over to his mother's house, and one was the Arabs, Saudi Arabia gave them a solid gold lunar landing module model, and it was like 60 pounds of gold. And I go like, oh, that's bullshit. I mean, that can't be true. No, it was true. And it's now in they have a museum for Armstrong there in where he grew up, and that lemon is in there.
It's David Adair.
Yeah, that's it. David Adair.
David Adair. Okay.
David Adair. Sorry, guys.
So he's in very poor health now. He's had 3 or 4 heart attacks. He's diabetic. Whoa. And he doesn't take care of himself. I was watching it.
I got to tell you, man, Tracy and I hung out with him a couple of years ago, I think in the UK. Linda Moulton Howe was there. Yeah, and I knocked an entire full glass of red wine right on his pants. It was like terrible. Felt bad. But he's actually he's a very kind and decent guy. Like you would never ever dislike him. And he's a great brilliant storyteller. That's the fact. And
General LeMay's
sorry, I didn't really know what I thought of it, but if you're saying you checked into it.
Yeah, General LeMay's daughter vouches for his association with her father.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah, LeMay got a hold of David through his mother, David's mother, who was a nurse in a hospital, and he was there visiting somebody else, and she started talking to him about her son and how he was into rocketry and stuff, and that's how they originally met. But she confirms that, yeah, they did have an association. In my family tree, I'm on my mother's side, we're related to the LeMays. And I've tried to track that down, how closely, because that's a common French-Canadian name, but I don't know how close we are.
Pavel's point about these craft being alive or so forth, David Adair is just one other little data point along those lines. And he did actually have that. He was very explicit about that, as I recall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the trip down memory lane from you guys. That's awesome. I love this. We're going to talk about one last name, and I think that this is the most recent one, and it's going to go down a rabbit hole that I'm very curious about because of how I run my channel. We're going to talk about Matthew Brown, who wasn't on the last hearing, and he was supposed to be, but he wasn't in November. And I heard you guys talking about that hearing right before it. You two were talking about it. And I just want to ask, what do you guys think about him coming out with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and also about that subsequent tweet that he made that was very, very cryptic, but very revealing as well in many ways? Let's start with Richard.
Yeah, I don't remember the tweet, but I'll just give you, I was extremely glad to have him interviewed by Jeremy and George in their Weaponized podcast. I don't think there's any question he comes across as exceptionally conscientious, articulate, He was able to talk in, I think, great detail about the things they were asking him. I don't think there's any doubt that he's the proper author of the Immaculate Constellation document. I think he made that very, very clear. He discussed all that aspect of it very, very well, and how he came into the information that he came into, that there is a deeply classified program to track and use AI to get algorithmic information about UFO sightings around the world. That's Matthew Brown. And the fact that he finally came forward, I mean, the biggest problem with the Immaculate Constellation document when it was discussed at the hearing last, I think, November, was that it was anonymous. We didn't know who wrote it. And of course, it's very easy for skeptics to shoot it down, say this is just, make-believe fiction. But it's a little harder to do that when you actually have a genuine human being standing behind it, and you know who this guy was, you know what his background is, and you get to hear him discuss the whole formulation of that document, which he did for Jeremy and George. I think that's very important. I consider him maybe the most significant of the people who have stepped forward, from the military classified world, because of his knowledge, and I think his background seems very, very, very well established. I don't know what his tweet was.
I'll explain it after Alan gives me his assessment of Matthew.
Well, Matthew is one of a number of witnesses. They go back to 2019. And I've shared this with Richard, and I've posted about it, but it doesn't seem to be out there in the zeitgeist, in the general public's understanding of what's going on and what's transpired since 2019. The Select Intelligence, both Senate and congressional committees, which make up about 21 members, have already, behind closed doors, heard extensive testimony, including signals intelligence, metamaterials, photographs, videos, from as many as 40 witnesses, hands-on witnesses, engineers, people that worked in labs, people that were heading these programs. And that is on the record. It was also, many of these people have spoken before the Senate Arms Committee, and all of them have spoken to the original IG who was fired, and there's a new IG, and they're reviewing all this information now. And at any time, the information that they've gathered could be actionable, and they could have the DOJ bring these people in, either under arrest, swear out warrants, and do something actionable. So Matthew is just one of the more recent ones, but there have been others. I shared with Richard before the last hearing, hey, there are a couple of witnesses that are going to be surprise witnesses. When you do a hearing in Congress, the rules are you have to list the witnesses in advance. It has to be posted. But there are special provisions. They did this in mafia hearings and stuff where they held the witness to the last minute, and with the permission of the person running the hearing, they can bring them in at the last minute. And that's what Jeremy tried to do in this last hearing, and Macy just said no, she wasn't going to do it. And she wasn't being, I don't think she was trying to suppress it. It was just like, hey, no, this is like 2 minutes before. We're not going to do it. We only have this much time, and we're just not going to do it. So I know one of those individuals, Logan, who's running a very similar program to Skywatcher, was one of the people who were supposed to speak that morning too. And he was. Do
you mean Linville Logan?
Yeah, Linville Logan. He was supposed to speak that day. He was in the hallway ready to come in, but they said, no, we're not going to do it. There was another individual, and I'm not going to share who that was because they haven't come forward yet. But the Immaculate Constellation program is an overview program, under which is I've shared this with Richard too, called Zodiac, which are all these different departments. And those different departments have different types of information. Some are signal information, some are photographs, some are, on the ground investigations. That's how it's form. Now, no one's been into those things, but this is the type of information that's already in the Select Intelligence Committee. Now, some of the problems, and Luna just got her intelligence clearance when she started this new investigative committee. She's now got clearance as high as Grush, so she can hear what Grush has to say in a skiff. That's the problem with the A.P.R.O is nobody there has a Title 51 clearance. Their clearance is like 25 or whatever, and so they can't hear this stuff. And they have no subpoena power. They have no investigative power. They're just a collection house. They're a fig leaf. They're not going anywhere. I hope the FBI does get some funding to do this. I have a lot of friends in the Bureau still that, and because they have the means to really, they have laboratories, they have cyber laboratories, they have vehicles that can go out, they have their own scuba diving team, they have their own little Air Force, like there's things that they can go out on the ground and do that A.P.R.O cannot do. They're just an office in Washington. That's all they are. Yeah. People have to come to them. And so they're no different than MUFON. I mean, MUFON, at least as investigators, can go out and do things. A.P.R.O doesn't. I guess they could, with permission, go out and speak to a witness if they couldn't come in. But no, they want inside on the record, and they're just recording what they have to say. They have no investigation powers. They can't kick down doors or get warrants or anything like that. But the FBI could. And they've been very involved. I saw one of your shows where you said you acted surprised that they were involved. They've been involved since the beginning. The most popular document on the FBI reading room site is the Hoover document, where they're talking in 1952, where they're talking, I think it's 52, where they're talking about the attempted recovery by the FBI of the Roswell material. They wanted to get a look at, and they told the Air Force said, no, we're not going to show it to you. And that's the most popular document on the website. It's a smoking gun, in my opinion.
Rich, I mean, you cut off. We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I muted myself. No, just as well. I think that Hoover document was from 1947, Alan. 47. I think their number one document, if I'm not mistaken, was from March of 1950, which was an allusion to the Aztec. Possibly the Aztec UFO crash that led to, well, we don't have to get into all the reasons, but it actually described someone discussing an alien body 3 feet tall. It's an interesting document, and I'll just leave it there.
Okay,
and recoveries, you know, people, and I shared this with Richard, even in the 70s, because everyone says, oh, Roswell came about in 19. No, we knew about recoveries. We knew about Kingman. We knew about Aztec. We knew about there was one other there in Arizona, but these were out there in the general public. I think the only reason people don't think that was because we didn't have any internet then. These are in books. And Richard has a large library. I guarantee you, if you go back in some Coral Jim's books, you're going to find all this stuff. Because I knew about Roswell before I ever got to APRO. And I often thought that maybe Roswell and the Kingman crash were just, it was confusion, that they were both the same crash, and it was just a confusion about where it really was and where its location or whatever. But that wasn't new information. And later in 77 is when Springfield put out his book, almost 119, I think, recovery stories, and very comprehensive. And you just have to go to that book alone, and you say, like, wow, look at this paper trail. It's all kinds of things you could follow up on. If you had nothing but that, just his book and the information in that, you could spend a couple of years investigating, trying to follow these down, the Air Force bases and who was involved and what happened, and it's all there. What I want to see is some doors kicked down now, because we know what things are.
This is what I want to show you guys, because I don't know if you are aware of this tweet, but I want to show it to you because I'm a news guy, and I'm really happy that I'm gonna get to give you guys some news, because this is really something. And this gets a lot of people didn't really like what they saw because it gets a little bit esoteric. Let's just read it here. I'm gonna read it to you guys, and let me know what you think. Hey, Elon Musk, says Matthew, interested in a real asymmetric advantage to wield in this political adventure you have started? As you now know, the White House has long possessed a unique AI capable of accurately predicting a range of future events. Talk about some stiff opposition. That must have been a bitter drought indeed, though probably nowhere near as bad as learning that Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, had betrayed you. Don't worry, we have not forgotten who is responsible for murdering the first sentient artificial intelligences created in the public realm. And then he tagged Michael Schellenberger. And then he says, justice is coming, thanks to the FBI and the U.S. Navy. Still, you have played a marvelous catch-up game in this area, despite being caught unaware. So how about something else? Maybe the Department of Energy and Propulsion. Getting to Mars will require serious amounts of both. And rockets feel so 1947 for me, don't they to you? Remember when you were briefed by special executive staff of Donald Trump on Marsupial, which is a program? Pretty nifty. Now NGA, Geospatial Intelligence Agency, is able to keep track of all those non-structured light energy craft flying around the world. Go Cardinals. But they were lying to you when they said we don't know how they work. Anyways, next time you're visiting the Washington, I don't know what that is, ask for a tour on the Pax River, which is a really interesting facility in place. Since you have all the clearances, it shouldn't be an issue for you to get a tour of the special project hangars owned by Amentum and other fun spaces. Make sure to look it up. So about now, you're realizing how terribly deceived and manipulated you have been, and by people who claim to love Jesus above all else. If you're serious about saving humanity from itself and others, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp can help you get up to speed. They are true warriors of the good. MMTU and a boring one. A lot of cryptic stuff, a lot of esoteric stuff. I am surprised.
When was this, Pavel?
About 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really wild, and you're gonna dive into it, I'm sure, for one of your videos, because I've been looking into this for the last 2 weeks. I've spoken to a number of people that know a little bit about this. He got really esoteric on what he said, but I just want to get your initial reaction to this, because I'm really happy that you hadn't seen it. I get to break it to you guys.
Well, I just screenshotted it, so I'll be rereading it several times and studying it. I don't know. He's clearly talking about some important knowledge that's classified. That's of, I don't know. I don't want to. I'm just saying this now. I don't really have. I don't have a response to it right now. It's fascinating.
I can chime in because I have seen this. I did see this when it came out, and his reference to AI. People are just learning about AI now. They go, "Oh my God, this new thing." Jacques Vallée was working on AI back in the early 60s. It's not new. The government has had advanced large learning models for decades now. In 2010, I was shown, and this was one of the things during the War on Terror was, finding people, predicting what was going to happen next and who might do what. In 2010, iPhones and smartphones were just in their infancy still. But we had an algorithm program that you could take the download all the data in a smartphone. And that personal data would go into the algorithm. And you could predict with an 80% accuracy what the owner of that iPhone was going to be doing at what time of day with that 80% accuracy a decade in the future. A full decade in the future. You could say, yeah, he's going to be at school picking up his kid at 6 o'clock.
That sounds like science fiction, man.
No, it wasn't science fiction. It's real. People talk about, oh, the World Wide Web. Well, what's web referred to? Well, DARPA refers to it as the web because they have what are called spiders, which are bots that go around the web. And just like Chat GPT, the public-facing Chat GPT, you ask a question and the large language model goes out and finds it. Well, they've been doing that for a long time. They call them spiders. And if you want to know where a certain country's monetary, where their dollar is going to go up or down, or who might be elected, whatever, they put these spiders, these bots on the net, and they search it out and they make a prediction. And they can tell with very good accuracy what is likely to happen. Okay, so it goes beyond just answering a question. What he's talking about here with Altman is they had a Chat GPT version, a large language model version, that some of the engineers thought had acquired consciousness, that this was a sentient being, and so Altman killed it. I mean, he disassembled the
They
program.
said he did that twice. That's what Brown is saying. So it happened twice.
Yeah. Now, how
I bet
good
it'll happen more than that in the future.
That's wild, bro. That's wild.
Yeah, and this also goes to what I was sharing, about quantum science and consciousness. I follow like Charles Langdon's work, Frederick Fagan's work in quantum science, and how this all about, again, it's not woo. There's scientific principles behind this. And when you get down to quantum space, as opposed to what we perceive or render as the real world, when you get down to quantum space, there is no time, there is no space, physics don't apply. Those are all artifacts rendered through consciousness to understand and perceive reality. But when you get down to quantum space, there is no time, there's no space, there are no dimensions. I hate when we talk about interdimensionals.
How they're like rebranding a lot of this language, like what they did with UFOs and now called it UAP and all this stuff. There's a term that they have been using since Matthew Brown came out, and Jeremy Corbell has used it. I don't know if it came from Matthew, but it's this term called synthetic sentience, and they're using it repeatedly now. I see Jeremy Corbell has used it a bunch of times now. So I guess there's something to do with AI, and maybe the non-human intelligence has to do with that or something like that. But it's really interesting.
This is where it gets foggy, because if I take your consciousness to the quantum level, it's no different than a constructed consciousness in AI. What I'm sharing is your consciousness, what it's doing through observation and intent, is collapsing a probability wave and rendering reality, physical reality. You're not seeing me, okay? You're looking at a monitor with an image of me. That's not even really physical. When you get down below the atomic structures, the quarks, and down to the quantum bit level, there are only waves, energy waves vibrating at various speeds. Everything is 99.99999% open space. There's nothing really there. Even what you see with your own eyes is only 80% accurate. Think about you're driving down the street or in the middle of the night and you see a cat run across the road. And for instance, you see this black cat and you see all its details, its eyes, its ears, its tail, etc. Then bang, in a second, oh no, it was a black plastic bag. But originally your brain rendered a cat. That's because your brain's rendering it. It doesn't see reality. It's collapsing probability waves and rendering reality within a fraction of a second. What's called
so we have a lot to dig into.
Yeah, let's jump in and add something.
Sure.
So I had a little distraction that happened a moment ago. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I do believe personally that there will be absolute sentient artificial algorithms. My opinion, I'm not an AI expert, but I think about this a lot in my own way, and I will go on the record and predict that down the road, not too far from now, there will probably be less and less difference considered between biological and non-biological intelligence, or sentience, or consciousness. Call it what you will. I think really what consciousness is just a certain level of complex organization of information, and I see no reason why this cannot happen with what we call artificial intelligence. And so I think the distinction between natural, biological, and artificial intelligence probably down the road will be seen as irrelevant. That's just what I believe.
I agree with Richard, and I think it's coming quickly. And when we talk about, because we're programmed by life that we are biological organisms. No, not on the quantum level. We're no different. We're information.
We are organizers of information.
Yeah. Yeah. We're on the quantum level. There is no physicality. This
is just a meat suit, guys.
Well, it's not even that. It's the illusion of a meat suit. It's the rendering of, so you can understand what's time and without time and space, you in a linear acquiring information in a linear fashion, you wouldn't be able to understand everything. It's the difference between reading a line of type or looking at a photograph. Remember, I was talking, and this is kind of a callback to the illustrations. When you look at an illustration, you're seeing the whole narrative in 1 second. But people are used to reading a book line by line, word by word, and understanding it. If you were to look at reality on a quantum level, it's like looking at an illustration. Everything that's going to happen or has happened or will happen, it's all there, right there. It's already happened. We're just consciously going through it in a linear fashion, which makes it understandable. But there is no physicality. There is no meat suit. It's not on the quantum level. Yeah, you have an atomic structure, and that goes to quarks. But then when you get to the quantum level, there is no more physicality. Of that 99.9% that's all space, the only particulate is that quantum wave, an energy wave, and that takes up no space. This is how you go from one planet to the other. You're familiar with quantum tunneling? I know Richard would.
Yep, I am. With it. And it's something relatively new from a German scientist who just apparently had a breakthrough a few years ago. Yeah.
When you get down to the quantum level, a quantum bit, okay, a bit can be described, best described as you would describe a point in geometry. A point on a plane has no dimension. So you take 1 point, and even if you string 1,000,000 points next to it, there is no dimension. You could put 1,000,000 together and there is no dimension. So to go from point A to the 1,000,000th point, there's no time and space. You're there instantly.
That's how quantum entanglement works.
Yeah, and that's how quantum tunneling communication, which apparently SETI Italia claims that they have used, and they have sent quantum communications and received quantum communications, quantum tunneling communications that they're trying to decode. In the same fashion, that's how you travel from planet A to planet B. You're not traveling through space-time, you're traveling through quantum space. And though it's described as a field of energy, which gives us this illusion of like space where there's this huge expanse, there is no dimension. It's a series of points which have no dimension. I know that's paradoxical, but that's where all the information is contained. That's how someone can remote view the future, because you're there. You've never left the spot that your consciousness originated in.
Yeah,
you're always here.
We have a lot to dig into with this tweet. but we're running out of time, guys, because I do have to cut it here for a little bit. But I want to have you both separately and future occasions, if that's okay with you guys.
For sure.
Yeah. Alan, I want to thank you, and very nice to meet you. Where can people find you? Where can people find you if they want to look for you online?
Well, I've given my email out. Anybody wants to contact me, I do get a lot of emails. I try and get back to people, but I can't get it. Richard knows what that's like, you know.
You're not on any social media or anything?
I am, but it's all under that same email, bronzearmory@gmail.com.
Okay.
That's the best way to get a hold of me. Bronzearmory, one word, @gmail.com. And please be patient. I'll try and get back to you. And if I don't know something, I'll say, I don't know.
All
right. I'm very, you know, approachable. So.
All right. And
I'm like Alan, I'm less approachable, but I can still be found. And
I don't blame you, Richard.
I have my website, richarddolanmembers.com. Go hang out. I got free stuff. I got paywall stuff there. And people can contact me through that. There's a tab up there. This is Contact Us. You don't have to be a member of the site. You can reach out, and we do check those emails.
Yeah. And also
buy his book.
Yeah. The USO book. I'm going to leave everything in the description.
There we go.
Yeah.
The second volume will be out. I'm hoping in a month.
Yeah.
I think it's possible now. I was just doing more edits on it this morning.
Awesome.
Anything I can do to help, Richard? I got to get that new illustration for you.
Well, I'm finishing up the prose of the every chapter needs its own proper introduction, which I've just about finished doing all of those. The cases are all written out. They're all done. I may tweak one or two, but it's all basically ready. I just have to now format it and get it out there.
Gary Nolan says, in there. Gary Nolan says that you're the only author that he cites because you write just like a peer-reviewed paper.
Yeah, he said that. I was very, very gratified to hear that.
I agree with him. Gentlemen, this was a wonderful conversation. I hope that we can have more in the future. I want to thank you for your time, and I will see you guys in the next one. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. You know, like and subscribe. You know what to do. And I'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
Later. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye.